Liberty Nation with Tim Donner.
And now we welcome you to the portion of Liberty Nation Radio, which we entitle Talkin Liberty. And, you know, there's a great deal in the way of threats to liberty these days. And who better to enumerate them for us than our legal affairs contributor, constitutional lawyer, and the man we call our guardian of individual liberty, Scott Cosenza. Hello, Scott.
Hello, Tim. I am here to be the Debbie Downer of the of the segment. Yes,
but we need to know what to be down about, and let's
where
start.
The attacks are coming. The only way we can rebuff them is if we know where they're coming from, and that hopefully is a valuable function.
Exactly, and it's a time of peril for people who love liberty because it's so easily given away in a time of crisis. In San Francisco, they have banned reusable grocery bags. Now, this may not be the worst thing in the world, but it does reduce individual liberty while supposedly improving public health.
That's the point of the story, Tim, is that we talked on this program not a year ago, I think, about them banning the plastic ones. Remember, that was what was going to save the planet. The plastic straws and the plastic bags had to go. You're like Charlie Manson if you walked around with a plastic bag.
Hey, ho, ho, plastic bags have got to go.
I think it was 5 years ago, maybe 3 years ago, I was in Toronto on a trip, and I bought a shirt, and they asked me if I wanted a bag, and I said, yeah, and they rang it up, like, you know, I forget how much it was. It was a nickel or a quarter. And I thought, no, I didn't mean I wanted to buy one, sir. I just wished for my garment that I just purchased to be placed in one. Well, that's what happens in a lot of these places where the progressives took hold, and in spite of the fact that plastic bags don't actually contribute that much to overall waste, and also they have a great health benefit, a safety health benefit, which is that raw food, which often contains harmful microbes, not to mention things like viruses that can live on these things for a while, go away when these bags are disposed of. So we railed against what we thought were short-sighted bans on the plastic bags, and I think this is just the chickens coming home to roost here, where now they can't abide the reusables.
Let's move on to businesses suing the government over a coronavirus closure order. What's this about?
Well, Tim, we have had and talked about the case of gun stores suing who were not included on the lists of emergency keep open type businesses, where they're allowed to stay open. And we talked about abortion clinics also, which have sued. And by and large, they both will be allowed to operate in the states. But what we haven't talked about are like non-essential businesses, because those involve fundamental rights, as the Supreme Court has defined them. And what about just a regular business that does not involve any enumerated fundamental right, like the right to keep and bear arms, or a judicially crafted fundamental right, like the right to privacy in abortion services, which the Supreme Court has done? This is a business that sells bells, Tim, hand bells and other types of bells, like you might experience if you go to church, especially during Christmas time, and they have these bell ringing. And I know that you do know what I mean, because I have been to the ringing of the bells with you in a church.
I do.
At Christmas
time.
True,
you did.
And it's quite lovely. And the problem is that they can't produce their bells. Schulmerich Bells is a Pennsylvania bells manufacturer in Hatfield, PA, and they've challenged Governor Tom Wolf's order that they not be able to remain open. They haven't said that they intend to remain open and flaunt what we might now consider common safety rules with COVID-19. So they don't seem to be irresponsible. They're just saying you can't give us a blanket shutdown order based on your say-so without any due process. There's been no finding that bell company can't operate safely within the COVID-19 protocols, for instance. And so I think this is we're going to see more suits like this, and we're going to pay attention and see what happens.
I think one of the cutting-edge issues surrounding this coronavirus subject, Scott, is, you remember when Bill Clinton said famously, it depends what the meaning of his is. I think we're going to be debating what the meaning of essential is, because essential businesses are the only ones that are going to be allowed to operate probably in all 50 states sooner rather than later.
Well, we'll see what the courts say about that, Tim.
Indeed, we will, as we always do. And speaking of the courts, a federal court says that violating a site's terms of service isn't criminal hacking. Praise God, a story not about coronavirus.
Well, this is a great story, Tim, for Liberty, I think, because what has happened is that prosecutors tried to turn the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, which is the sort of primary anti-hacking law in America, into people who would just violate a site's terms of service. And the problem, making it a crime. And it's really quite, I think, shocking to the conscience that you could say, like let's say, for instance, that a website said you have to be a resident of the 50 states before you could access it for some reason that they wished, and you weren't, and you accessed the website anyway or signed up for an account. I think that there are many Americans, Tim, whose minors have accounts at Facebook and other places where maybe they're not allowed to. They lie and say that they're older or something like that. Or maybe the opposite. Maybe there's a site designed for children and marketed for children, and an older person decides they want to see what's going on that site, so they lie and say they're a young person. Well, those things are not crimes, just like lying to somebody in person isn't a crime. Fraud is still a crime, so this isn't about fraud. I want to make that clear. This is just about whether you can access a website and violate the terms of service and not be penalized criminally.
Okay, after a thankful but quick trip down a bunny trail other than the coronavirus, we go back to COVID-19, Scott, and the feds say it'll take up to 90 days to approve new mask-making facilities.
Tim, I think it's important that we always try to recognize, when people are being demonized. We've talked about the hoarding and the profiteering challenges on the show before, but the people who are in charge of seeing that these masks from the governmental perspective are out there, both the Centers for Disease Control and the FDA, are not doing what they can to bring them to market. And in addition to allowing speculation in the marketplace with respect to price, which I think, the facts demonstrate will only bring more masks to market, the other thing is they're hobbling the ones that are out there right now. And could be brought in due to fealty to a regulation. And, we do have, the reason why we have things like battle overrides and emergency declarations, I think, is to bear witness to the fact that we're not in ordinary times, and perhaps that the lengthy approval process, even though I don't agree it makes sense in other times, that it doesn't make sense now.
Do you even remember what ordinary times were like, Scott?
It seems like a while ago.
Doesn't it? Now, in a story that kind of blends ordinary times with the crisis we're in now, the Trump administration has scrapped the Obama fuel efficiency standard and opted for a more lax rule. That's something I think that the Trump administration wanted to do anyway, but now they figure they want to do anything they can to boost a struggling auto industry.
I think the big industry people are actually against this move by the Trump administration. And I think it is a case of rent-seeking and protection by big businesses against smaller business. And what I mean by that is, if you're running a high-volume business, Tim, then the compliance costs can be folded into each unit. And the higher that compliance cost is, it benefits you against a producer who is a much lower volume level, right? Because the cost per unit to increase to comply with these rules. It's one of the reasons why we have large companies oftentimes in league with government to increase barriers to entry into the marketplace through increased regulations. And this is about the corporate average fuel economy standards. Government regulates these things and puts these targets and makes companies and punishes companies if they don't meet those targets. The Trump administration has said that the increase in mandated efficiency will be dialed way back. So there's only going to be a small increase in mandated efficiency. Now, Tim, the pro-freedom perspective says, hey, if you want to buy an electric car or a Prius or a hybrid or a gas guzzler, those are your priorities, and you should be able to meet them along with any market participant that meets your needs. So you should be able to buy a Tesla if you want, or you should be able to buy the gas guzzler car if you want.
Thank you, Scott.
Thanks, Tim.
This program, Liberty Nation Radio, and LibertyNation.com's own podcasts, The Uprising, hosted by Scott and The Rabbit Hole, Politics and Prose, where past is prologue, all available on demand at LibertyNation.com. So that is it for this week, but we'll be back at you next week, same time, same station. Till then, stand up for liberty and for heaven's sake, stay well. We'll see you next time on Liberty Nation Radio.